I want to welcome everyone to the Focus on Africa LGBT plus allyship as queer work. And I want to thank the sponsors and partners that came together to make this work. Quite a few folks came together. So the Center for African Studies for hosting us, as well as Silent Majority Ghana for really kind of coming together to help bring the panelists together. The Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership, Nubia International Sorority, CASCADE, the two student organizations that are helping to moderate, Knights Fraternity, which is another student organization that's supporting us. So I want to thank everyone who, again, came together to really bring us together for an important dialogue around things that have been going on, long overdue to have this discussion, but specifically around things that have recently been happening in Ghana. So if you don't know what's been happening in Ghana lately, you'll find out today. And if you do know what's been happening in Ghana, then at least you'll get a chance to talk with some of the activists that have been on the ground. They can kind of discuss more in depth some of those issues. So I'm actually going to hand over the mic to Anima, who is with Silent Majority Ghana, and they will take over from here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Nsia. So yeah, my name is Anima Ejapan. I use the pronouns, and I'm a member of Silent Majority Ghana. So I just want to kind of share a little bit about who Silent Majority Ghana is. We're a group that came together in a moment of crisis. We're a transnational collective, and our primary goal is to amplify the voices of supportive voices who are allied to LGBTQ Ghanaians. And so the work that we do so far, which we've only been around for a couple of months now, but we've really been doing work to ensure that folks in Ghana know that they have support, and also to help educate and activate people who want to do ally work. And so what's an ally? And this is a term that is pretty commonly used to describe people who might not necessarily be part of a particular oppressed community, but nevertheless are in solidarity with them, working to change the conditions. But today's panel is actually doing ally a bit more expansively. So on the panel, we'll hear from people who are themselves queer or trans, as well as people who are allies, because we want to really ensure that the conversation makes room for the various avenues for work and invites opportunities for really thinking together. So I'm thankful for the panelists. I'm thankful for the moderators. I'm thankful to the African Center at Howard for making this space available. And I'm going to turn it over to Cynymon and Laten, who will be moderators for the event tonight. Thank you everyone for being here.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Focus on Ghana, Allyship Through Queer Work. My name is Cynymon Colebrook. I'm a senior, graduating senior from Howard University. I'm a biology major, chemistry and Caribbean studies double minor from the Bahamas, and I'm very excited to be here.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Laten Jordan, a sophomore honors political science major at Howard University from Columbus, Ohio, and my pronouns are he, him, his. And we will begin by just reading a bio of each of our three amazing panelists. So Emmanuel Owusu-Bansu, popularly known as Wanlov the Kubolor, is a Ghanaian and Romanian music maker, filmmaker, and activist. Wanlov plays the guitar and koshkas and speaks Pidgin, English, Ga, Tree, and Romanian. Wanlov is also part of the satirical duo Funk Boys with Mensa, who are credited with creating the world's first Pidgin musical, 'Cause of Money. He has collaborated with acts like King Ayusaba, Gidea Bla Amboli, Sina Dagudu, Alatsman, and Sister Deborah. Wanlov produces talents that have positive social messages because he himself is an advocate for human rights and the environment. Wanlov is popular for his humor, bravery, and unorthodox views on varying topics. He travels the world barefoot, making his memories and connections to places more intimate. The Kubolor wants freedom and justice for all.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Magnus Jamal Venins. He's a Ghanaian trans man, an activist, and an advocate for LGBT and trans rights. He's the founder and executive director for Alliance for Dynamics Initiative, a transgender-specific organization in Ghana. He's the chairman of West African Trans Forum and a member of the interim governing body of ISDAO and African Trans Network, respectively. Jamal has been working directly with the LGBT community for 6 years and is passionate about the community and wants to see everyone happy. And finally, our third panelist, Nana Dakoa Sekyiamah, is the co-founder of the award-winning website, podcast, and festival, Adventures from the Bedrooms of African Women. The multimedia project creates and publishes stories about African women's experiences around sex, sexualities, and pleasure. Nana is a writer whose work spans genres including creative nonfiction, short stories, and essays. Her book, The Sex Lives of African Women, is forthcoming from Dialogue Books in July of 2021. Nana lives in Accra, Ghana.
Before we begin with the panelist questions, I would just like to, offer each panelist the opportunity just to introduce themselves by saying their name and their pronouns.
Hey, I'm happy to jump in unless you want us to go in a particular order. My name is Nana Darkoa Sekyiamah. You can call me Nana. And I use she, her pronouns. Great to be here.
Hello, my name is Emmanuel Osubonsu. My artist name is Wanlov the Kubolor, and my pronouns are he, him.
Hello, everyone. So the name is Jamal, or you can call me Magnus, and my pronouns are he, him, his.
Thank you all for being here with us today. This webinar is really meant to bring together activists and allies of the LGBT community in Ghana. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of your affiliated organizations and the advocacy work you all have done, what does allyship mean to you, and what do you believe makes an effective ally?
Is there anyone in particular you want to answer that question?
Not in particular. I think just everybody can answer if possible.
Okay, all right. I think allyship can be complex, right? I don't think I have ever thought of myself personally as an ally. When it comes to LGBTQI issues, I consider myself a member of the community, even though I recognize that I think because of maybe how I move in the world, people may perceive me more as an ally than anything else. And I think when it comes to people who consider themselves allies, they have to ask themselves what their motivation is, if they're the ones who should be speaking up on an issue, and more importantly, how they can create space for the people in the community, for the people most affected by an issue to feel safe, to feel free, to feel comfortable, and to be the ones who are speaking about not just the issue, but the solutions to the issue, because I think the people most affected know the solutions better than anybody else.
For me, like Nana Dakoa, I really don't think of myself as an ally, and I just see myself as a fellow human being in the spectrum of human beings. And the way I present myself to the world, or at least in this part of the world, I am a perceived LGBTQI person, like because of the way I dress and because I have a lot of LGBTQ plus friends and so on. So a lot of people in my environment also suspect, for me to be a member of the community. And what I feel, or what drives me really to protect my fellow human beings is more of a selfish reason, is self-preservation, because there's laws or they're trying to pass laws in Ghana that go and that will further endanger the lives of the LGBT community. And coupled with poverty, if I'm walking down the streets the way I dress in what people will call, maybe they'll see as a mini skirt, or see the colors and the way I present myself to be other than what they think I should be, somebody who wants to rob me can just start shouting gay slurs at me and have me mobbed, and I can get robbed and they'll probably get away with it. So the average Ghanaian, or I don't know whatever, I mean, the average homophobic Ghanaian or the average Ghanaian who thinks LGBT oppression will only affect people who are really, whatever really means, gay or queer in their perception, are also endangering their own lives by being homophobic, by supporting or being silent about homophobia. So I just feel I'm just an average human being trying to make my community a safer place for everybody.
All right, thank you for your responses. So in addition to bringing allies and activists together, the webinar's main focus is on the LGBTQ experience in Ghana. So specifically to Jamal and Nana, can you tell us about the LGBT plus experience in Ghana? And what is the narrative in Ghana of the LGBT community?
I'm going to let Jamal go first and then I'll chip in.
Jamal, please, we are waiting for you. Maybe it's frozen or...
Jamal, you're still on mute.
Your mic is muted.
Sorry, I was talking, was on mute. Your question was, the line was breaking, so I couldn't hear it.
I'll repeat the question. Can you tell us about the LGBT experience in Ghana, and what is the narrative in Ghana of the LGBT community?
Right, so as we all know, a lot of times people tend to forget that LGBT plus persons are human beings, just as every other human beings. But when issues of LGBTs come up, then Ghanaians, or majority of the Ghanaian society, become so religious, and then they'll be quoting a lot of homophobic books and readings just to make us feel less of human. And then a lot of time, that is where the question of allyship comes in. And if you look at the majority of allies that we always say we have, in my perspective, I think that as an ally, you should speak up against all forms of abuse towards LGBT persons, whether at a good atmosphere or not. But we happen to find majority of our allies speak up when the time is right. But when the time is not right, they tend to keep quiet or not say anything, and then say, we'll address the issues later until all the tensions have died out. And you don't have majority of the queer community being out. A lot of us, or a lot of queer people, are in the closet. So many people fall on allies to speak. And then, as Wanlov said, we are even speaking against abuses and stigma towards the queer community. You are being tagged as one. So it makes it very difficult for allies to also come out. And then people do not, like the police allies that we have, allies in other workplaces that we have, wouldn't want to openly associate with queer people for fear of losing their jobs, right? So most often we are not alone, but alone at some point.
Yeah, I think Jamal has really said it all. I guess the only thing I'd add is, maybe it's restating the obvious. Ghana is a homophobic country, even though we somehow enjoy an international reputation of being a peace-loving, democratic country, you know, and it's especially unsafe for people who belong to sexual minority groups. And we are currently going through, I feel like, the worst wave of homophobia that I have personally experienced in Ghana, which has been stoked by a coalition of far-right civil society leaders, people in the religious organizations and churches, ironically, who do not preach, in my opinion, a message of love, but rather preaching a message of hate and intolerance. And for me, what is especially scary is that right now there are a number of members of parliament who are sponsoring or seeking to sponsor a private member's bill to basically ban any sort of advocacy for LGBTI rights. And Ghana is a country that has signed on to many international conventions. I feel that this is a really dangerous step, which will take the country back several decades. Yeah, and that's sort of my perspective, just to add on to what Jamal was saying.
Thank you both for both of those perspectives. I also want to note for attendees that you can use the Q&A feature to ask questions that'll be answered at the end of the webinar.
Yes, thank you for that answer. I would like to stick with Nana and Jamal for this next question. How do the various organizations you are a part of amplify the voices of LGBTQ plus Ghanaians, and how can allyship aid these endeavors?
I'm not part of many organizations. I work for a feminist organization, an international organization called AWID, the Association for Women's Rights and Development. And definitely, we consider LGBTI people we describe LGBTI people as one of our priority constituencies, of which we have many, especially people from the global South who are working to create a better world. And the way we center the work of LGBTI people is really by trying to create space for them to speak about the issues that affect them, to connect with like-minded activists from all around the globe, you know, to identify and strategize on solutions to create a better world for all. I'm also a member of Silent Majority Ghana that Anima spoke about at the beginning of this webinar, which is an informal collective of like-minded feminists and queer allies who want to contribute to do what we can to create a safer world for queer people. And in fact, when you create a safer world for queer people, you are of course creating a safer world for everybody, like Wanlov had illustrated in his example earlier.
Yeah, so my organization is a trans-specific organization. And the more reason why we formed a trans-specific organization is we realized that little or no interventions were being implemented targeting trans groups, right? So we had LGBT organizations that were in existence, and then even though they were working with trans persons, but there were no direct interventions. And then realized that a lot of times trans persons, especially trans women, were being abused based on their looks and then the way they dress. And oftentimes they mistake their dressing to be their sexual orientation. So that is also, we normally advocate against that. And even in the LGBT community, we tend to have a lot of people throwing transphobic comments. And then whenever a trans person is abused, they are quick to judge and ask why they dress the way they do. And then maybe they are dressing cause whatever abuse that came upon them. So we try to change and then correct all these narratives. But as my colleague said, Ghana is a homophobic country that a lot of time, even if the country accepts some treaties, they sign some treaties, and let's say UPR, we have UPR that Ghana accepted too, by ensuring that LGBTs are protected, but it was not announced, and then majority of the Ghanaian community is not aware of this. And then you go to UPR sessions, there's action plan and then implementation plan. You have the government supporting child rights group, disability groups with funding to support their work, but we happen not to get this. It's only when they travel to the international world that they show solidarity and then support towards queer communities. But in the country, you have a whole minister standing in parliament and then saying, if left for them, there should be a ban on queer advocacy. And I ask myself, is it the kind of human rights that we shout, like sustainable development goals that they say they are leaving no one behind, but a lot of times the queer community, the queer and trans community are left behind. So these are some of the advocacy that the queer organizations do to ensure that people often ask, which special rights are we asking for? And then there is no any special rights that we are asking for. Human rights should be respected and then be protected. It's something that is ours, and then we are demanding that respect and then protection. It's not any alien right or anything of that sort.
Wow, thank you for that. That was very powerful. So I kind of want all three of the panelists to answer this next question. So given the current circumstances of lack of protection from the government and the discrimination and oppression from religious organizations and media in Ghana, in what ways does allyship and solidarity help uplift the LGBT plus community and combat the negative stereotypes associated with being queer? Starting with Wanlov, please.
I think about a year ago, a little over a year ago, they were trying to introduce comprehensive sexual education into the syllabus of, I think, high school students. Into the students. And it was met with a lot of resistance because they were going to learn about different genders and sexualities. And so the religious bodies pushed hard against this. I feel if those syllabuses or bio had passed, we would not be at this pressure point right now. We would have started diffusing the homophobia and the understanding, because children will learn about different gender sexualities. They'll go home, they'll tell their parents, some will be resistant. At least something would have started happening. And so what we try to do in our interviews, in our social media, our presentations, our artwork, art forms, we try and educate the Ghanaian public about pre-colonial, first of all, pre-colonial evidence of LGBTQ+, like in society. We try to educate Ghanaians about the laws that criminalize same-sex intercourse as being Protestant, Puritan British colonial laws, because a lot of Ghanaians go to this where it's like, oh, homosexuality is un-African, it's being introduced, it's being forced on us by the West. So we try to make the general population aware and try and inspire them to go and research that actually it is homophobia that is foreign and imported, that we were not like this before the Europeans came, at least for a lot of societies where there's evidence of this. And so that is what I try to do, with my platforms and with my creativity, is try and make more people aware or inquisitive, and it's happening, but it's it's very little drops in the ocean of hate, because the main thing that I feel is driving our homophobia is poverty. Poverty coupled with, of course, religion. But the poverty aspect is that, in our society, the average Ghanaian is bullied by every institution. The average Ghanaian is oppressed by even the church they go to, because they have to show a certain amount of money and flashiness that they don't have here to get a certain proximity to their pastors or certain expensive people in society. The average Ghanaian has to bribe a school to accept their child. The average Ghanaian has to bribe the hospital nurse or doctor to see their child, or they don't have money to pay. So the average Ghanaian is oppressed by the poverty in society and take it out on the most marginalized groups of people, one of them being the LGBT community, as well as the poor people. So worse than being an LGBTQ person in Ghana is to be a poor LGBT. That's like an abomination to be poor and gay. And so we're just trying to open the minds of people to do small research or introspection and try and unlearn certain things, learn new things, and become, more wholesome human beings. And so it's frustrating, but we have no other option than to keep doing it and try to devise methods of being more effective in the dissemination of these energies. Yeah, that's kind of a jumble of what I try to do.
And I think Wanlov is a good example of, the power of creativity and changing mindsets, or contributing to changing mindsets. So in terms of what I would like to see allies do, I'd like to see more allies reflect reality, reflect that we have a diversity of human beings, we have a diversity of genders, we have a diversity of sexualities. I'd like to see this in the shows that I watch on TV, in the books that I read, in the examples of leaders I see around me. And I feel like that's the only way change will happen, by really normalizing diversity and showing people come from all backgrounds. For me, that would be true allyship, for people not to pretend that there's only one type of gender or one type of sexuality,
Yeah, so for me, I think that in as much as we need allies, it's up to the queer community or existing organization to also try as much as possible to hold refresher trainings for allies, because we don't expect every ally to be updated or well informed on queer and trans issues, especially trans, because a lot of times you have allies that are not much informed on trans issues, and then they tend to misgender and then pass transphobic comments without knowing that they are wrong. But as well, as an ally, we also expect that you should be able to open to learn, unlearn, and then relearn. And then you should also check your privileges. When I say privilege, like allies are more privileged than queer people in Ghana. And then it is really surprising, because an ally can be on radio with other panelists and then show support without being attacked or being abused verbally. But a peer person will be on the same panel, and then all questions will be centered on how we have sex and then what is underneath our clothes and all of that. So I think that as allies, we need to think like allies should think themselves as more privileged, and think that being an ally is more of an action than rather a label. Like standing somewhere and say I'm an ally to the community isn't enough. You should try and then show much support and then try to correct the narrative in everywhere we find ourselves, in churches, in workplaces and all. And then sometimes too, as an ally, you should know that we are human beings, we are born to make mistakes. And the most important thing is to accept your mistake and then apologize and then we move on, rather than saying, oh, sorry, I thought you have breasts, so your pronoun is she. That's sometimes not good.
Thank you all so much for those answers. I definitely agree. I think it's important to just re-examine allyship and, hold these trainings just so like they know themselves what an effective ally looks like and how they can normalize diversity, as Nana said. But for all of the panelists, my next question is, what advice do you have for LGBTQ plus youth in Ghana that may have endured hard times? And also, what advice do you have for the allies that want to help but don't know where to start?
It's really hard, right? Like in terms of like advice for LGBT people who have endured hard times. I think for me, what has always worked is finding my community, finding my people, finding like-minded friends. You know, I surround myself with community. I think I pretty much live in a bubble. That's how I keep myself safe. My friends are other activists and creative people. That's what, I mean, for me, community is safety. So I would say that try and find a queer group or a feminist group that's also queer, you know, so that you can create a safer space for yourself. In terms of how allies abroad can support, I think there are a variety of ways. You know, there are lots of queer organizations in Ghana that are online. So I think you can get in touch with them and find out what their specific needs are. And obviously, you know, we see events like this that we've been invited to also as a form of support. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what to tell an LGBTQ plus youth because I've never been in that position to understand the oppression. But yeah, like Nana Dakoa said, like a lot of youth reach out to me in my DM, and I most of the time refer them to LGBT Rights Ghana on Instagram. They're on other platforms, but on Instagram it's LGBT Rights Ghana. There's no Q in there, LGBT Rights Ghana. And yeah, and then I just follow up to make sure like they're okay. Ask for advice, yeah, Charlie. Yeah, I don't have the experience to give the advice.
Jamal, would you like to go next?
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah. So we have a lot of LGBT plus organizations in Ghana. If I'm not mistaken, about 15 or more. And then we have some groups that are more visible and they're known by all. And then we have some that are growing and then known by few. So a lot of times if queer people need advice, we often direct them to organizations that are more advanced or have more knowledge on a particular acronym. So there are LBQ specific organizations. So if there is a lesbian that needs an advice, we direct them to this LBQ specific organization, that is Sisters of the Heart, Courageous Sisters Ghana, and then Wanlov Sisters Ghana. And then we have trans-specific organization, intersex-specific organization. And then we have the large, broader LGBT plus organizations that are also in existence. So we refer them. And then we also started this queer YouTube channel that we were using to educate and correct the myth and misconceptions of the community that not every queer person would want to partake in our open event. So people go on the YouTube channel to educate themselves. But during the backlash on the community, the group decided to pause for some time because there was voting, and then majority carried the vote that we pause for some time till things die out. But there are other works that are being done behind the scenes.
Thank you for that.
Sorry.
Thank you. So the final question for all of the panelists is, what are your visions and hopes for the future of queer Ghanaian citizens and queer people around the world? We can start with Nana.
I just want queer people over the world to live their best lives in every area of their lives, to be free to do whatever they want to do, which is really not asking for much, right? People should be able to be free to be who they are, to be able to work wherever they want to work, to travel without fear of, being lynched and mobbed and harassed. I just want people to thrive, to occupy public space, to be able to celebrate their unions publicly if they so wish. I think it's basic, really.
Yeah. And I would love to see, us remove all this hate and fear from our hearts and just be able to ourselves to ask what someone's gender or sexual orientation has to do with my life. How does it affect me? And once I come to the epiphany that it doesn't affect me in any way whatsoever, then I just carry on with my life, and I wish that could happen to all of us, but we know how the world operates. So at least if we can build a safe space and the LGBT community can be able to protect themselves with the laws and we force strong arm the government into writing protective laws and so on and enforcing them. But yeah, I think we'll always have this tug of war till we start teaching the youth from childhood about the spectrum of humanity, the spectrum of gender and sexuality. And that is the only way, is to really reprogram ourselves, because colonization and religion and classism and capitalism, I guess, in a way, is creating so much harm to our brains. So we're not thinking as human beings. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would want to see an environment where queer and trans persons are free from stigma and discrimination, where I can freely talk to my dad about a woman that is giving me heartache or making my heart jump beat. I can freely tell a pastor or an imam that I want to get married tomorrow, and if they would want to bless the marriage for me. This and many more is what I wish for my queer and trans folks, where they can live their truth, where they can dress as how they want to dress without being judged or being bullied. And we can all live together, having all queer organizations coming together, devoid politics and then backbiting, working together as one people.
All right, thank you all so much for your all very unique and diverse perspectives. I feel like this is a very informative discussion. We'll now have a question from Fabene.
Hey, Vabene.
Hey.
Yeah, thank you for this wonderful program that you've organized. I'm happy that I know almost all of you over there also, so I'm very glad. Yeah, I think one thing that I would say that also the community at large is facing, I don't know globally, but in Ghana, is that I feel like sometimes we are also mistaking just our friends for allies or queer friends for allies. In that sense, there are people who who may associate with us or relate to us because of maybe our career. I'm an artist, a performance artist, so people may relate to me, they come to me, they eat with me, they jam with me. But then some of these people are actually homophobic when they are outside my space. And some of them also run organizations. So we may be thinking that, okay, this organization is queer allies, and then we may be involving them, but we realize that they are just related to some of us just because of our status, because of our class, or because of the kind of group we belong to. And the same is the media house in Ghana. There are some media houses that would interview some of us. They will give us all the platform, and yet when there are homophobic statements going around, they are the same people who are promoting those kind of actions. So yeah, so like I was saying that some of these people, like I just give my personal example and also like the media example. So I'm wondering what are your take on as allies on these complexities when we are looking at friends of the ally groups or friends of the queer groups and then allies of the queer groups.
Yes, thanks, Vabene. It's good to hear your voice. I was hoping I could see your face too, but no. So there's a group of journalists which are journalists against LGBTQ rights. I think there are about 20 or so journalists. They formed this group a few months ago. And it's crazy because in their book of ethics at the Ghana Institute of Journalism, right there, one of the main rules and laws is to not discriminate by ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, religion, and so on and so forth. And yet, people who have graduated from this school have come together in hate to form such a group. I have a big frustration with my fellow artists, the so-called big artists and stars of Ghana. None of them, apart from maybe Sister Deborah, who's my sister, none of the big stars, the big stars, have done anything, said anything, like music stars. I know Lydia Forson has said something in support of the LGBT community, but it's crazy. And what I see as the thread between that's linking their homophobia or making them afraid to say anything is religion. Like most of these artists, they go to church or they have some kind of religion they are following, or they don't want to learn. Meanwhile, all around them, they are makeup artists, they are fashion designers, they are set designers, they are film producers. Exactly. And the people they meet in all their communities around these big artists are LGBTQ people. And so, and at the same time, it's like, I would say if I was somebody, I'll quit, I won't work for them, I won't support those artists. But at the same time, you have the right to not want, you've been under oppression your whole life. So if you don't want to be further oppressed, to lose your job, for some artists to fire you because you're now asking them, why don't you protect me when you see me as a regular human being and I come to do your makeup for you or this and that. It's like, yeah, who am I to see how that person should react to these artists? But I can speak to these artists and say it's super shameful. I'm really ashamed. I've had to cut my ties with about 5 major artists in Ghana, write them DMs and tell them if they see me in town, they shouldn't even try to say hi to me. Because I don't understand how you can compartmentalize human beings. Oh, you're cool to do my makeup, to do all these things around me, but when the police are coming for you or when the mob is coming for you, I'm just gonna stand by and watch. I don't understand that. And I feel if you can do that to somebody who you benefit from on a daily basis, what about me, who you don't benefit from? I'm just a fellow star or musician, If I'm getting beat up somewhere one day, you can also just turn your head away because it comes it comes in sections. It's going to be the LGBT community, then it's going to be another community after. Because hate, we are feeding hate, and hate will never get satisfied. It will always look for a new group to devour. And so we need to recognize this hate and fight it away right now. So Vabene, sorry for ranting on your question and taking up so much time, but I feel the media houses are doing very poorly. They just allow you to come and speak, and then they allow people to come and spew hate. They just pretend like they're a neutral ground, but they shouldn't be a neutral ground. They should educate themselves. All these journalists should educate themselves and become better people and become advocates themselves for humanity, for a cause, for something, for good, because they are just giving platforms for hate. And the hate is always louder in
Wanlov,
society of poverty.
Don't be sorry at all. Don't be sorry at all, because that's the right thing you are saying. That is because those are the people that are just friends to queer fellows, but because we are also looking for compassion, we are looking for love, and we are looking for people in our support, sometimes we mistaken those people just for allies. And then we start mentioning names. Yeah, these people are our allies, but they are not. They are really just taking advantage of our situation and exploiting us in a different way. I can say an example here. There is a lawyer, I won't mention name, but it's a lawyer who personally, after an interview on the television, personally invited me. And when we sat and spoke and drink, he told me that you've been my friend for long and you are still my friend. And even if you would need my service to defend you in court, I will do that. But if my son become gay, I will shoot him. So, and I was so shocked. I was so shocked that came out of his mouth. So like, I wouldn't see such a person as an ally, but I'll see such a person coming in for business and somebody who's just interested in me as a person because thinking that I would be able to afford for the court or whatever thing, you know? Yeah, so so we have a lot of these people, even more than the allies in sincerity. So I would just say to the queer community, we should also be careful the people we name and label as allies.
Yeah, I also think that some of the mistakes are from the peer community ourselves. Like we tend to get comfortable around these stars, and then we forget that all the utterances that they put out there, if it is not affecting them directly, it's affecting their peer friends. Like when they get to the limelight, they forget where they are coming from, or they forget the other colleagues that are not privileged to be styling up artists and all of that. And then even tend to deny, and then they themselves pass homophobic speeches. And if they have their fellow stars or stars that they style them up passing homophobic comments, they go and like and then comment on them in a way of showing support to all of this. So I think it's about time that we talk about all of this. Like you can talk to your fellow, the star that you are working with, or any celebrity that you are working with. So if you don't want to show any support or pass any positive comments towards the community, the least you can do is to shut up rather than passing comments that will make you trend and then disrespecting the community.
Thank you, Vaveni, for your question and for speaking on your experience, and to Wanlov and Jamal as well for answering. So now we'll move into the Q&A portion of the webinar, starting with a question from Isada O'Dwyer. Can you speak on the colonial legacy of homophobia in Ghanaian laws and society? We'll start with Nana.
Yeah, I think Wanlov answered this question, but basically Ghana has a law that bans unnatural carnal knowledge. It doesn't say exactly what unnatural carnal knowledge is, but it's basically a colonial era law that is still on our books today, which, you know, the scary thing is we can't even speak about getting rid of it because like I mentioned earlier, some members of parliament are proposing is actually to replace that with a law that's overtly homophobic, you know. Because unnatural carnal knowledge implies anything that's not basically penis and vagina sex. So that could be oral sex between, you know, that could be oral sex, that could be cunnilingus, that could be like anything that's not penis and vagina sex, you know, it's basically unnatural carnal knowledge, yeah.
Thank you for that. Our next audience question comes from Nana Boyan. How can Ghanaians in the diaspora help organize against anti-LGBTQ legislation in Ghana? And we can start with Jamal or Wanlov if you want to go.
Jamal, are you ready to go, or should I go? Okay, I guess I'll go. Pressure, external pressure. external pressure, letters to the ministers, to the government, tapping into the networks of Ghanaians in the diaspora to give pressure, to make comments on social media directed at these legislators and these ministers, the specific ones that are super homophobic. And so, yeah, just to shame or, find a way to convince them, because at the bottom of it all, like a lot of these ministers flaunt their homophobia because it's a popular thing to do in Ghana. So the more they feel it's becoming unpopular, the less they will do that. So the more voices we have in support of the LGBTQ plus movement, the less resistance we will face. At some point, there will be a tipping point or breaking point. So we just can't let down the pressure. We're going uphill and we just need to give it everything we have.
Yeah, so I also think that if we get to have the embassies denying all these homophobics access to visas to travel, because the unfortunate thing is all these homophobic politicians have their families or their children in countries that are legalized and they are living there. So if they are being denied access to these countries, they will sort of sit up. And then one other thing is to have more time on air time. Like a lot of times, the time that we get to engage the media on FM stations are very, very minimal. And then they are the ones that have invited. So you don't get to even correct the narratives. But if you have the resources to buy time to engage, you get the time to talk to the general public to correct those narratives. So we can be looking at this. Another way is by doing art, like where you can have theater act that has nurses, doctors that are queer people, so that the Ghanaian person that is in a village that has been brainwashed that all queer people think about is sex can at least see that, oh, there's a queer person that is a nurse, there's a queer person that is a doctor, and their life is not all about sex. These, in many ways, are what we can do to correct all these narratives.
All right, thank you so much for that. We'll now have Dr. Anima Ajapong to ask a few questions.
Thank you both so much, Cynymon and Laten, for steering this wonderful conversation, which has been really, I've learned a lot, and I appreciate the panelists so far. So I'm gonna kind of help with asking the questions. We've received so many great questions. The next one is from Mawuko Jakwe, who asks, do you think awareness for LGBT plus rights in Ghana, in Ghanaian education, might be able to negate the homophobic mindset taught to the youth through tradition and culture? And I want to ask Wanlov to start speaking on it, because you mentioned the comprehensive sex education panel. So can you begin with that, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's so powerful, like educating the children from a young age. It's the most effective way of steering the future. I don't think anything like there's any other more permanent solution to this than to teach the children, about full humanity, about the spectrum of life, of sexuality, gender. I mean, and the things that you learn, as a child, like that's what makes you who you are, like who I am today, Yeah, I mean, an example of, because at this young age right now, children are actually being sent in the opposite direction with religion, with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, with the story of Adam and Eve, that the woman did this to Adam and she was the apple. So now women, so even from the beginning, like the religion that we introduce in the schools, and coupled with the paternalism, very anti-woman and anti any energy which is not what the West considers a male energy. So it's very important that we program, because that's what it is. We have to program our youth to create a future that we would like to see right now. We may not get to enjoy it now, but we don't want the youth to come and suffer the same thing. So yeah, that is the answer is in the question, really. I shouldn't even have said anything.
Thank you for that. And Nana, I actually want to loop you in because I know like through your work, you do education in a different format as well. So yeah, to kind of actually push the question a little bit, sorry, Mauko, if I may, to ask in what ways and what avenues, given that, the comprehensive sex ed bill was shut down. So what other avenues Wanlov uses his art? I know you have the but for now, Nana, what other avenues might we be able to engage in doing this kind of educational work?
I think all sorts of avenues. I started the blog with my friend Malika because we literally recognized that growing up, we never had space to talk about sex, to learn about sex, and we wanted to create a space where we could share primarily with other women our experiences of sex and sexuality as a way for us to learn. And it's also why I think that popular culture is super, super, super important in terms of education, right? It's in the shows we watch and the music we consume. And that's the kind of education I am particularly interested in, one that utilizes the tools of culture in media, because I feel like that's more powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And certainly much more public in other ways. Jamal, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I believe that if you have education on correcting all these homophobic attitudes towards queer people, it will help, because if you ask 10 people and why and how they hate queer people, 9 out of the 10 will not give you any tangible reasons why they hate queer people. And then out of the 9, 8 out of them have not even had any direct contact with a queer person that they know, but their hate and then their attitudes towards them are based on what their pastors or their imams or their religious leaders have said. So if there is education and then theater arts that is aimed in correcting all these narratives, there will be change in attitudes, and then people get to understand queer and then trans people more, and then have a homophobic free country.
Thank you for that. So the next question comes from Marina Montgomery. They say, thank you for hosting this important discussion. As the Assistant Director for Study Abroad in the Ralphe Bunche Center at Howard, it is our team's responsibility to effectively support students from the LGBT plus community to study abroad. It is not uncommon for Howard students who identify as being part of the LGBTQ community to express a concern or hesitance to study abroad in Africa, or specifically in Ghana. So the question is there any advice and resources that the panelists can offer future Howard students interested in studying abroad in Ghana that are part of the LGBTQ plus community?
I'm just going to jump in. I mean, I think it's also important to mention, and I think Wanlov alluded to this earlier, right? That obviously not all queer people in Ghana experience violence. A lot of this is also class-based, right? Whereas if you're a poor queer person who lives in an underprivileged community, perhaps you're more likely to encounter violence. You might travel by public transport, so someone might attack you for appearing to be queer, for example, and I can imagine that there are lots of queer people who navigate the country relatively safe and free, but it also depends on how you're read and how you're perceived, right? Like no one is ever going to read me as queer or attack me because I'm queer. So I think it's important to, I guess, determine what your risk is on a personal level, because it will differ from individual to individual, and to make a plan based on that, right? What my security protocol would look like would be pretty non-existent, whereas for somebody else, it might need some considerable security protocol. And I would also say, if you're traveling to Ghana as a queer person, you know, probably be a good idea, if you can, or if you feel so inspired, to connect with the numerous queer organizations that exist in the country, that offer space and support for queer people in the country, and are usually quite open to queer people from outside the country as well.
Okay, Nana, thank you for that. Our
And
next
Cynymon,
question.
if I can just add to that, to Marina's question, because I think, Nana, you offer a really important intervention in terms of how embodiment structures how queer people move through Ghana. So it's both class and embodiment, but I think it would be so wonderful for the Study Abroad Center at Howard, for example, to have a list of the queer organizations that students can directly reach out to when they're traveling, so that, you know, they at least know that they have some community, and then that can also develop new kinds of relationships. I think that could be a really wonderful approach.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Cynymon.
No problem. Thank you for adding that suggestion. The next question is from Hannah Fentahun. They are asking for Wanlov to respond to: being an advocate and an activist for the LGBTQ plus community, how was your experience being a part of the music industry?
The thing about my music is I'm not really known for my music as much as I'm known for my personality in Ghana. So it hasn't really affected my music to an extent that is, but of course, definitely there's less DJs who are going to be playing me now, because I've had to block at least 500, 700 people on Instagram and on my WhatsApp and so on. So I've lost a lot of contacts in the industry and out there because of my current public support. But I make most of my income from music touring in the Western part of the world. And so I use the resources I gather from that to support artists which have social messages, pro-LGBT message. Like I just produced a music video for an artist, she's a trans woman, and stuff and so I'm not really concerned about the music industry in Ghana, especially seeing the reaction from the music industry is very pathetic. I expect the music industry, to be the most progressive group of Ghanaians, to actually be speaking to the church, to be speaking to the neo-colonial traditional African culture that we have now. But they are almost the most silent, where actually we have a couple of artists that have come out and said some really violent, despicable things towards the LGBT community. So I'm not really concerned about Ghana's music industry. It's a bunch of trash.
Thanks for that, Wanlov. And it's really quite unfortunate. I really like what you said, the neo-colonial traditional African culture, because that sounds precisely right. It is both rooted in a history of violence that claims to be traditional and to be something else. I want to bring two questions together from Morgan Shaku and Angela Adachi, because I think the questions are pretty similar. It's asking how, as allies, doing advocacy work can bring about. How do you protect your mental health and overall well-being while doing this work, and also trying to be an active advocate for LGBT rights? And Angela asks, how can we work together to create systems that protect allies who are visibly working to combat homophobia? So I hope you can see the kind of similarities there in terms of taking care of yourself, but also creating systems that help folks who are doing this work. And any one of you can start. Then I kind of want to invite you to go first on this one.
Sure. It looked to me like Jamal was trying to unmute, so I was waiting. Yeah, I feel like actually doing the work is also part of protecting yourself, right? What is safety and well-being if people are unsafe? And the advocacy is to try and make everybody feel safe, which will also make, you know, me personally safe, and other allies and other activists who do this work also safe. Yeah, I want to look at the question again, but I mean, I think it's also extremely fine as an activist to decide to step back from doing, you know, frontline advocacy. I think it's extremely fine to say nothing at all about an issue. I think it's extremely fine to turn off your phones and not respond to messages. I personally never engage trolls. That's the way I keep myself safe, you know. And like I've said earlier, I surround myself with community. I choose to surround myself with people who I don't need to debate my identity with, or who do not debate other people's identity and humanity. That's an inherent part of being safe, and that would be my recommendation for other people. At least that's what works for me, you know?
It's not easy.
Jamal, do you want to kind of pick up on that as well?
Yeah, I'm struggling to understand the question. So I was going through the question to know who it came for to read it.
Sure. So the first part of the question is from Morgan Shakur, and it asks, it says, it's not uncommon to be under extreme stress or experience violence or danger while doing advocacy work. How do you protect your mental health and overall well-being while also trying to be an active advocate for LGBT rights?
Yeah, so a lot of time you tend to take a break yourself. Like these are the questions that now activists are now talking about, like trying to bring on board, because over the years we didn't really put ourselves first. And then a lot of the activists that are working with queer organizations are normally not on salaries. And then you don't have any mental health program that is, or you don't even go on leave, you don't even cater for yourself, but people see you as activists, and then the first thing that comes in mind is you are rich, or there's some donor
Million
that is
euros.
sponsoring your lifestyle or anything. So it makes it really hard. But these are the conversations that we are beginning to talk about. We need to look at our mental health, because sometimes we break down, and then we have some people that will try to have a lot of orgasms to calm down, and then others watch movies. But when it comes to going on vacation, seeking for psychosocial counseling and all of that, we don't have all of that. And then I don't blame the movement a lot. We have little or no funding. So the fundings that we normally get, we push it into the community, helping, having workshops and all of that. So yeah.
Wanlov, you said earlier it's not easy. do you want to expand on that?
Sorry, I keep thinking that someone is controlling the muting of the mic, so I never mute my mic. So that's why you heard that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's for me, it's very hard for me to switch off when I'm passionate about something, because it's like an everyday thing for me. Like my sisters, all my sisters, like friends and PAs and everybody, you know, a lot of people we have around us are LGBT, and I can't imagine like someone leaving my sister's house and sitting in a church and being beaten for speaking in a certain way. So I'm always, I'm always activated. And I, even when people, like today, I had a couple of artists come through for their music video. And in the concept, I am putting some LGBT elements in their music video, and I'm watching them. I'm saying, okay, here we'll do this, and a guy will dress like this, and a woman will do it, to see their reaction. So as soon as I hear something like, hey, no, I'll just say, please leave my room and go to your house. So I'm constantly like, I have an agenda. Okay, they're saying like, I have an agenda. People are saying like, oh, they've given me €1 million. Europe has given me €1 million to turn everybody into a gay. I'm like, no, I just want everybody to take their minds out of people's private parts. Like you're walking by a house and you're looking at the window and wondering what's happening inside the window. Like, what is wrong with you? Sorry, I'm hearing something, a voice in my head. I don't know if it's in my head. Anyway. So yeah, I can't switch off. So I'm constantly in a poor mental state, but I have ways to alleviate those stuffs. I have certain liquids and certain grasses and things that I consume to balance myself.
Thanks for that. And because I wanted to combine the question, and you know, I think Jamal really brought up that point of like people are pursuing different ways of taking care of themselves, and they're not necessarily always the best ways. You know, not that using grass is necessarily bad, but you know, it's an important thing to think about, like how do we create systems that protect allies? And so that's Angela Adachi's question that I want to make sure that we answer. How can we work together to create systems that also take care of allies who are doing this work?
Okay, I want to, I want to jump in here from the perspective of someone who works for an organization that has been doing a lot of advocacy around resourcing for feminist movements. And part of what we do in our work is to say it's not just important to give more and better funding to like feminist organizations, but to give funding to those organizations that have been the most marginalized, which, you know, for the purposes of this conversation, absolutely include the LGBTQI community. And what you will tend to find is donors are often willing to support projects, but they're not willing to give core funding. They're not willing to give funding that supports salaries, for example. As Jamal mentioned, there are lots of activists who don't draw a salary. You know, they're not necessarily willing to give funding that will ensure that people can get health insurance, right? That they may have security at events. And that's critical. And for me, that's also systemic. So if you're a donor and you're given funding, make sure your funding is core. It is funding that the groups can use as they see best, that they can change the course of their project if they realize it's not working, if the environment changes and they want to switch to doing a different type of project, that they have the flexibility to do that. And for me, that's more systematic, right?
Yeah, so because it is really difficult to work with peer organizations and then have other jobs. Like you can't watch someone's shop and then when it's time to go and work as an activist, you leave their shop and go. How do you get paid? So a lot of times we happen to lose more of our volunteers because they need to also have a source of income. But since we don't have the resources to pay them or cater for their needs, they come and then they go. People have the passion to work. Yes, you need to have a passion to be an activist, but you need money to also live in Ghana. So it makes it hard. At first, we used to say that we are not doing this because of the money, but because of the passion. Yes, we understand that. But we've realized that now even to throw away your refuse, you need money to do that. So yes, people will be there for some time. And then when they have the chance to travel outside of the country, they go and then they don't come back because you face the backlash, you face all these abuses from family and then relatives, and then you have nothing to show. you don't have where to lay your head when family kick you out. And these are the things that we need to look at. All the philanthropists and then the donors out there need to also look at, because when you look at the LGBTQ community now, they are vibrant. We have organizations that are coming up, and then people want to work, but the resources are not there. So it makes it very difficult to work as a more vibrant organizations, because you need human resource to.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, for me, if I'm considered an ally, I feel intent and surgical spite. It's like, if, like, I understand that human beings are being human beings, surviving in the world, but I would like to see more discernment with what we consume. As a musician, like for me, what I do is I create art, music, visuals, and so on. And I feel nowadays I'm following more heterosexual musicians. Even though I like their music, I'm like, okay, your music is nice, but now I have a new mission to discover LGBTQ musicians, because they need my support and I need their energy to understand my world better, that part of my world that I don't know. So to now actively navigate, art and creativity and so on, to find musicians that are non-abusive, that are pro-LGBT, and to support those people and vice versa, So as somebody who is the supporter of the LGBTQ community, I will no longer listen to an artist which I know has some sexist or some kind of, some homophobic lyrics somewhere in their songs, like, because I can't listen to that anymore because it's not helping me mentally. And on top of that, it may harm somebody in my environment, so I'm being very intentful in the arts that I consume, especially I look into the background of who the creators are, what they've said, what they stand for. So I'm very intentful now, and I'm kind of vicious about it. Like, I will cancel you in seconds. That's how I'm moving now.
Yes.
Thank you. So now, just due to time, I'm going to ask the last question. So what would you say to someone who wants to become an advocate but doesn't know where to start?
I would say start from where you are, start from your most immediate environment. It's usually with the family, which is probably like the most difficult place to advocate, but maybe the most effective. And I truly believe that people change in time, right? I have seen how when I started speaking up about sex, for example, my parents were like, oh my God, why do you have to talk about your sex life? And now they feel so proud of me. And they're like, oh, well done. When are you writing your book? When are you finishing your book? So I just think start from your most immediate environment. Although, of course, like, especially for queer people, their family can be the most sort of repressive, most dangerous environment. So obviously you have to figure out what works for you. And I will say start by finding an activist community to be a part of. Start by doing the reading. There's so many resources out there. I think it's important to educate yourself about an issue and to learn about the issue from the people who are most affected by it.
Yeah, for me, I think it's read about whatever it is you're passionate about. Read, absorb, think about it, reprogram yourself, and then everything else will happen. If you have the will and the force to change things around you, you'll start doing them, because the more information and the more conviction you gather from new information, from hidden information, the more you emanate it around you, and yeah, either you start fixing things in your house, people, or dealing with people in your house or your environment, or somehow something will happen, but you need to build your foundation with knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, to add up to what my colleagues say, I also think that to be an advocate, you need to also work on your confidence level and then on your self-esteem, so that you are not easily bullied. If you have a higher self-esteem and you're confident of what you are doing, nothing will stop you, or you not feel less of human when you are being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
I think I actually also want to turn the question to our two moderators, who I imagine might have some things to say about ways to begin doing advocacy work. And I'm sure the audience would love to hear a little bit about your own understanding of that, because I know there are some college students in the room as well who might be able to learn from you as well.
Yes, I can start. So I'm a graduating senior at Howard and also a member of the LGBTQ community. So in terms of advocacy, I've always felt like an advocate, like even when I was younger. But growing up in a very, sad to say, homophobic country in the Caribbean, it was very hard to try to be an ally and try to advocate when there was just so many avenues of like people trying to quell that and fight against that. And so from my experience of starting off as a self-proclaimed like ally and supporter, and then kind of coming to realization with my own identities, that was a very interesting journey, but always like, I always felt very different from my family members in my community, because I always felt like the things that people were saying was wrong. And I was like, this isn't like how we should treat each other. And I just like knew deep down inside that that wasn't something that I wanted to be a part of. And so that's kind of where my advocacy work started. And it was just as simple as having conversation with family members at like dinners and like events and stuff. And it's like pointing out like, well, why do you have that idea? Or why do you say these things about queer people? And it took me coming out to kind of shine that light to them that, oh, wow, we were saying all of these things when like we had someone, a part of the community, like right here, like a family member that we love, and we're saying these things. So that's kind of where my advocacy and allyship started. So it shouldn't be, I would say it shouldn't come from a place of like, oh, I have queer friends, so I should speak up. It should just be, I'm a fellow human being and I want to see other human beings living their best life and living in a safe environment to be themselves. So I should speak up when someone is harming a marginalized community.
Through my undergraduate experience with advocacy, I largely kind of focus on, as a political science major, I focus on advocacy and like politics in the legal field. So through an organization I'm a part of, CASCADE, I just held like mixers with the LGBT Congressional Staff Association, just to discuss what it's like being a queer person in politics and how to rise above pressure or adversity you may face in those spaces. And then I'm also doing research on intersectionality in the legal field and how, laws and the Constitution and Supreme Court cases kind of negatively impact Black and queer people.
Thank you both for that. And thank you, everyone. I think one of the things I really appreciated was the encouragement to educate yourself. Sometimes people resist that as a foundation for doing this work. And yet it's really important, and education happens in so many different ways. And so really finding those avenues where you can learn more from the people who are experiencing these things, from people who've been doing the work, because the reality is that there have always been people doing the work. There are always people who are trying to get free. So just kind of keeping that in mind and seeking out those sources is a really great way to do that. So I want to turn it over to Msia to help close us out, but I personally want to say thank you to the panelists, thank you to the moderators for such a wonderful conversation. I learned a lot and I appreciate you all being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes,
I also
I
learned a lot.
really enjoyed this. And so again, I realized as throughout this that I had never introduced myself. So for those who are not at Howard, probably don't know who the hell I am. And so just to kind of say, I'm a professor in the Department of African Studies, and my area is cultural studies. And so I do a lot of work on hip hop and popular culture in Africa. So there was so much rich content in the discussion, especially regarding representation and the importance of it. And so I saw that Nana has a book coming out on the sex lives of African women. And so I'm really excited about getting that. I teach a class on Black women and popular culture. So I am really also always looking out for books that really kind of address women and sexuality and kind of gender and sexuality in Africa. So I'm excited about that. For individuals who are watching, you know, definitely check out the organizations and the individuals online. The information is on the Zoom information, but you know, follow folks on social media, the organizations, follow the individuals. If you're a student at Howard University, Nubia International Sorority is definitely an organization that does a lot of really great work. And so follow what they're doing online. CASCADE is a really great student organization as well. Follow them online. The Center for African Studies also does a lot of really great programming. And, you know, there is the FLAS Fellowship. So if you're interested in studying an African language, unfortunately, we don't do Tree. We do Wanlov, Yoruba, Swahili, Amharic, Zulu, but we don't do Tree. We need to, we should do at least one of the Ghanaian languages, but unfortunately we don't. But, you know, if you are interested in getting money for school, you should consider getting applying for the FLAS Fellowship and looking up the Center for African Studies. They're on social media, but also their website, the Department of African Studies. I saw a lot of my students actually posing questions in the Q&A, so I'm super excited that you all were involved. Thank you. You should see the social media handles that just popped up. So I'm really excited that some of you were asking questions and were engaged. I know a lot of this stuff we talked about in class. I know some of you are familiar with Wanlov's work because you've read about his work and just in terms of talking about the issue of gender and sexuality and importance of representation. So I want to thank the activists and artists that came, the students that came. I'm so excited and I was taking lots of notes, and we will definitely have this video available. The Center for African Studies will have it on their YouTube site, and I will probably also have a copy of it as well. So for those who may not have been able to see the whole thing, or for those of you who may have had friends who you feel should have seen it and been here, there will be an opportunity for folks to be able to see it who weren't here to see it live. So thank you, and that's it.